turning up the heat. President Obama says the U.S. military is hitting ISIS harder than ever. Border Mass. Pope Francis to celebrate the Eucharist on the Mexican-U.S. border. Healing hurts. 3 years after the Sandy Hook tragedy, families struggle with trying to forgive. And wreaths for warriors. Tens of thousands of Christmas wreaths now decorate graves at Arlington National Cemetery. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, December 14th, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. President Obama convenes a rare meeting at the Pentagon with his national security team. The president vows ISIS leaders can't hide. Chief White House correspondent and political director Lauren Ashburn reports from the White House tonight. Lauren?
Brian, this is the first time the president has been to the Pentagon since July, and he brought most of his cabinet with him. No real news here, no increase in the strategy or change in the strategy. What you're seeing is the beginning of a PR offensive by the White House designed to quell his critics who believe he isn't doing enough when it comes to fighting terrorism. He ticked off a list of accomplishments, saying in Iraq, ISIS has not had an offensive victory since the summer. In Syria, he says ISIS has lost thousands of miles of territory, and he listed ISIS leaders who have been taken out, including their top money man and Jihadi John the executioner. He admitted progress needs to keep coming faster.
The point is, ISIL leaders cannot hide, and our next message to them is simple: you are next. As we squeeze its heart, we'll make it harder for ISIL to pump its terror and propaganda to the rest of the world.
One thing he did say was that Secretary Ash Carter is going to the Middle East today. That is a bit of new information. And he's going because the administration believes that our allies are not helping enough.
And Lauren, what else are you watching out for this week?
Well, we're going to be seeing more of this PR offensive. On Thursday, he goes to the National Counterterrorism Center, and he does that every year before he goes away on holiday, this year going to Hawaii for 2 weeks. We also see them putting together a series of faith leader calls and conferences this week, and Valerie Jarrett is heading that.
Lauren Ashburn at the White House. Thank you, Lauren. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. A group of state lawmakers unveils new legislation targeting Ohio Planned Parenthood facilities. This after an investigation reveals that abortion provider is disposing of fetal remains in landfills. Wyatt Goolsby is here with that story tonight.
Yeah, Brian, Republicans in the Ohio House say there needs to be stricter laws on disposing of fetal remains in their state. According to this proposed law, the state's hospitals and abortion providers would have to do so by burial or cremation. The move by state lawmakers comes one day after Planned Parenthood filed a federal lawsuit against Ohio's health director. They say the goal is to, quote, protect abortion access at its facilities in Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. Those locations have been under fire by Attorney General Mike DeWine. DeWine updated me on a 4-month-long investigation revealing how Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio improperly disposed of fetal remains.
I just was shocked, and I think most Ohioans are shocked when they find out that a fetus, what they do is they go through this cooking process, or they go through this steam heat process, and then they're disposed of in a landfill along with everybody's garbage and everything else that goes into a landfill.
Pro-life advocates in Ohio have been protesting Planned Parenthood since videos were released by the Center for Medical Progress this summer. Unlike those videos, there is no evidence that Planned Parenthood in Ohio is selling aborted fetal parts. But some pro-lifers say this new investigation is yet another reason to protest the abortion provider.
People need to see abortion to understand it, and they won't reject abortion unless they see it. And so that's why we take the abortion victim photos and video into the public square, and that's why we do it at Planned Parenthood as well. People need to understand what's happening in a Planned Parenthood facility, and words alone fail our ability to actually describe what abortion does.
Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio denies the allegations, the CEO saying in part, these new allegations that we are improperly disposing of fetal tissue are flat out false. Planned Parenthood handles medical tissue like any other quality health care provider. Lawyers from Ohio's Attorney General's office are meeting today with the federal judge to discuss Planned Parenthood's lawsuit. Both sides are trying to reach a resolution without having to go to court, but right now they seem very far apart. Brian.
All right, thank you, Wyatt. The U.S. soldier who was held by the Taliban for nearly 5 years faces a general court-martial for desertion. That word comes from an attorney for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, who was captured after leaving his post in Afghanistan. A preliminary hearing officer had recommended the case be moved to a misdemeanor-level court, but that's now denied. Bergdahl is also charged with misbehavior before the enemy. A jury now holds the fate of Baltimore police officer William Porter on trial for manslaughter. He is one of 6 officers charged in the April death of Freddie Gray. Prosecutors claim Porter could have saved Gray's life simply by fastening his seatbelt or by calling for help after he was injured in the back of a police van. In their closing arguments, defense attorneys insist the case is based on speculation, not on evidence. Paris prosecutors believe a preschool teacher fabricated a story about a terror attack. The woman claims she was stabbed by someone wearing a mask who made a comment connected with ISIS. The report sparked a massive manhunt in a northern suburb of Paris. Now the teacher is the one being held by police for questioning. The war on terror could influence the presidential election in France. Some candidates are trying to capitalize on fears over Islamic extremism and the surge of migrants. This follows France's regional elections, which had mixed results. The French presidential election will be held in the spring of 2017. Global leaders celebrate a new climate deal reached Saturday in Paris. It's a commitment to use new technology to limit greenhouse gases. 196 countries signed on. As part of the plan, wealthier nations will help poorer nations financially. Secretary of State John Kerry represented the U.S.
That is going to spur massive investment, and it's technology. It's American ingenuity and creativity that is really going to solve this problem.
Some business leaders also praised the deal, though the transitions from fossil fuels to renewable energy won't be cheap or easy. Pope Francis welcoming the signing of the deal as he delivered the Angelus prayer in St. Peter's Square Sunday. He urges world leaders in tackling climate change to pay particular attention to the poor. Today, Pope Francis meets with the president of Sri Lanka. The Vatican called the discussions cordial. The Holy See says the two began the meeting recalling the Holy Father's visit to Sri Lanka last January. The Sri Lankan president gave Francis a large silver vase, and the Pope gave him a wooden tree of peace made from olive branches. According to CIA statistics, most Sri Lankans are Buddhists. Only 6% of that population is Roman Catholic. Also today, the Holy Father saying the problem of youth unemployment in Italy causes him great suffering. He says about 40% of people younger than 25 don't have jobs. The Pope mentions corruption as a factor involved in the frustration experienced by young people. He says earning a living helps people to feel worthy. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register, joining us from Rome. Ed, we're learning more about the Pope's visit to Mexico. What's on his schedule?
Well, he's going there on February the 12th, Brian. He's going for a few days to Mexico. It's going to be quite an interesting trip in the sense that it's really going to the peripheries, this one, because he's going to a border town, border with Texas, near El Paso. But he begins with a mass at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe, Mexico City. Then he goes to a working-class suburb, and then he moves on to Chiapas, which is a very poor southern border town in Mexico, and then goes to Morelia, which is well known for drug battles and a lot of drug violence. So he's really seeing the peripheries. He's visiting prison as well. So he's going to a lot of places where there's a lot of poor and marginalized people.
He chose the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe on Saturday to really talk about this. Make that tie for us. I understand Europeans are not as familiar with Our Lady of Guadalupe as we are here in the Americas.
That's right, yes, but it's obviously very important here, and the Pope celebrated it, really also bringing in the themes of mercy, which has been front and center for the past few days and few weeks as well. And so he wanted to use that day to announce the program for his trip to Mexico. And also, funnily enough, it was the 80th anniversary of the marriage of his parents, and he also mentioned that too at the Mass on Saturday.
How beautiful. So this trip to Mexico, why is it so significant right now?
Well, it rather goes back to what I said just now, which is the fact that it's really important, considering the Pope's interests and concern for those on the margins, those on the peripheries. And this is really very much playing into that. He's going to see, obviously, the refugees, people on the borders, which is very important to him and very close to his heart, and also those involved in drug violence as well. So all of this going to the margins, speaking to these people, the poorest of the poor, really, and using this visit to really extend his mercy in this year of mercy as well.
And he'll celebrate an open-air mass on the border between Mexico and Texas, so that's very significant as well. Ed Penton with the National Catholic Register. Thanks so much for joining us from Rome tonight.
Thanks, Brian.
A trip to the Vatican. Police say scammers are trying to sell fake apostolic blessings. Italian police seized 3,500 fake parchments valued at more than $75,000. They were confiscated from a souvenir shop near St. Peter's Basilica. These parchments resemble those sold inside the Vatican to fund the Pope's charitable efforts. Pilgrims are warned that fraud is rampant around the Vatican, perhaps a threat more real than terrorism. Coming up, is there a new leader of the Republican presidential pack? And the process of healing remains painful for families 3 years after the Sandy Hook tragedy. Today, December 14th, is the feast of St. John of the Cross, a Spanish mystic, priest, and doctor of the Church. In 1568, with St. Teresa of Avila, he founded the Discalced Carmelite order. Thanks for joining us this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Pope Francis condemns the ideological colonialism of Africa during his recent trip there. He's concerned the West is trying to impose its values on African people. Dr. Gracie Christie just wrote about this in an article for the National Review. She says, powerful and heavily funded actors such as the UN, the World Health Organization, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation ignore the rich cultural context of the African nations in favor of promoting their own social ideologies. Dr. Christie joining us now by Skype from Miami. Gracie, why do you think the Pope is speaking about this issue of colonialism now?
I think after the Synod on the Family, he's trying to keep the focus of the Church and really of the entire world on this very important concept, which is the family as the bedrock of society, and especially the Christian ideal of the family.
What is the West doing and pushing on Africa and other developing countries or continents that is opposed to church teaching?
Well, the Pope expressed his frustration on the fact that foreign aid is often tied to attempts to change the culture regarding family and sexuality. For instance, the promotion of population control with programs that promote abortion, contraception, and sterilization, and don't see children as blessings the way that all Christian churches have always seen children.
Instead of pushing Western culture on Africa, what would be a better way to reach the African people?
Well, there's great programs that are being funded by the UN and the World Health Organization that directly address the needs of Africans in fetal and maternal health, or DDT impregnated tents to combat malaria. So these are direct things that can be done to really improve people's lives, not to disconnect their families and deconstruct the families the way that the liberal West has done in the United States and would like to do in Africa.
So, Gracie, do you think there's a way the Catholic Church can cooperate with some of these organizations, find some common ground, even though we differ in so many key moral areas?
Well, the Church needs to keep up its real strong stance for the family, and do this at the UN, and do it the way the Pope has done it in Africa, and always speak out for what we really value, which is man, his wife, and their children, the welcoming of these children into the world, and giving them the best life possible.
Do you see that as we move forward, that there will be this cooperation and that the Church can make a difference in the way the approach is?
I think so. I think that the African nations, for instance, are fighting back constantly at the UN, and they find a lot of support from the Church, that's an important actor at the UN, and also in other world stages. I think the Church will have success in this.
Dr. Gracie Christie, thanks for joining us from Miami tonight. We appreciate you.
You're welcome.
And a shakeup in the polls shows a new Republican presidential candidate emerging as a top contender. A Fox News poll released Sunday shows Texas Senator Ted Cruz leading the GOP presidential field in Iowa. That's the first state to vote in the presidential nominating process. The poll shows Cruz with 28% to Donald Trump's 26%. Saturday, the Des Moines Register and Bloomberg Politics released their own poll showing Cruz ahead of Trump 31 to 21%. The sudden surge comes just a week after the New York Times released audio of Cruz speaking at a private fundraiser. In it, he questioned Trump and Ben Carson's judgment to lead America. In a taped one-on-one interview with CNN's Jake Tapper today, Trump responded to those comments.
I was against going into Iraq. That's good judgment. I was for bombing the oil long before anybody else thought about it. That's good judgment. I have good judgment. I have great judgment. I would say I have far better judgment than Ted.
The once cordial relationship between the two candidates now appears to be entering a new phase.
I like him. He's been so nice to me. I mean, I could say anything, and he said, I agree, I agree. But I think the time will come to an end pretty soon, it sounds like.
The two will face off Tuesday in Las Vegas for the last presidential debate of 2015. And on this 14th day of December, flags are flying at half-staff across Connecticut. They're marking 3 years since the deadliest mass shooting in an elementary school in U.S. history. As Catherine Zeltner reports tonight, the healing process after the Sandy Hook tragedy is still painful.
Can healing come in 3 years?
It's one of those days that you never forget, and you know exactly where you were and who you were with and what you were doing.
On December 14th, 2012, 20-year-old gunman Adam Lancet killed 20 first graders and 6 educators at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, before taking his own life. Monsignor Robert Weiss is pastor at St. Rose of Lima Catholic Church in Newtown. He was at the scene.
You're almost like in a war zone in the front of an elementary school in a town like we're in Sandy Hook, where this is not supposed to happen.
Monsignor Weiss still ministers to families grieving the loss of 26 innocent lives. Mary Sherlock was one of the victims.
You just say Mary Sherlock and faces light up.
Bill Sherlock was Mary's husband.
Mary was a very giving person, always thinking of someone else before herself.
Where did you guys get married?
In Vestal, New York, where she grew up.
He's adapting to life without the woman he knew for 36 years by his side. How is Christmas going to be this year?
It's sort of mixed. You know, empty chairs at the table. Ours way too soon.
Bill leans on his Catholic faith to get him through the difficult moments.
It gave me the strength to survive minute to minute, hour to hour.
Monsignor Weiss says each family copes in a unique way, but there is a common thread.
Forgiveness is a word that you don't hear in conversation very often in this town. I think when something like this happens, you want to blame somebody. I've always believed what the Lord's Prayer says. You know, unless we forgive, we can't love.
Where are you on this path towards forgiveness? What does that look like?
I knew this question was coming. I'm not very far down that path, and I know that I'm supposed to be a forgiving type of person. Forgiveness, forgive me, but that's I think still a long way off.
Can healing come in 3 years? In this town, it's just the beginning. This interview was Bill Sherlock's first one, speaking from a faith perspective. And Brian, Mary Sherlock also leaves behind 2 adult daughters.
I understand that one of those daughters has some good news for Dad.
Yes, there is some good news. Bill is about to become a grandfather. His oldest daughter will give birth expected Mother's Day.
The miracle, the circle of life. Thank you, Catherine. Up next, a pro-life webcast the night before the next Republican presidential debate. And tens of thousands of wreaths adorn our national cemetery.
libertà, la magnanimità, la speranza.
The Holy Father saying, how beautiful is the freedom, generosity, and hope of a man and a woman of the Church. At Mass this morning in the Vatican, his homily. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick, and it's good to have you with us. Ahead of tomorrow's Republican debate, presidential candidate Carly Fiorina is part of a webcast tonight focused on pro-life legislation. Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of Susan B. Anthony List, is also involved in the webcast. What do you hope to accomplish, and how can people be part of this?
Well, we will be happy at the end, Carly and Father Frank and I, if everyone gets off that call and says, this is a moment where I must act. It's great to have hearts and minds. We must have them. We do have them, but it will not be leveraged into laws that save human lives unless we have a pro-life president. That is where we need to get action really fast.
I want to turn to the story from Ohio and the dumping of the remains of babies in landfills. State law says that babies or the child's remains should be disposed of in a humane manner. How does that law, or what does that law mean, and is the language too vague there?
Well, Brian, I think the law says what we're hoping that hearts and minds will be drawn toward when we're talking about how to dispose of human beings. We're not talking about appendices and where they're disposed of. When we're talking about disposing of human beings, what are we thinking of? We're thinking of them being buried in a humane manner, in sacred ground. It may be that the law is vague. The most important thing, however, is that the Attorney General, DeWine, who is a great leader, is looking into this, as most governors are, and that that on the federal level and the Congress, there is a panel that is doing exactly the same thing. So Ohio will be replicated times 50, we hope, when investigations keep going from state to state to state, uncovering the humanity of the unborn child in every single place.
And that is the key. It is a human being that we're talking about. Marjorie Dannenfelser with the Susan B. Anthony List. We'll see you on the webcast tonight.
Thank you. See you then.
Thanks. Well, with Christmas approaching, an annual tradition makes sure the memory of fallen veterans remains evergreen. Mark Irons has that story.
Christmas time brings Terry Campbell here, where her son rests. Keelan graduated early from high school and got his dream job as a U.S. Marine.
He was well loved, still is well loved.
In 2010, Keelan Dunn was killed in Afghanistan. He was 19.
It makes a significant difference in my life because I don't have to share in his life and his memories alone.
On Saturday, over 70,000 volunteers joined Miss Campbell at Arlington National Cemetery on a mission. A wreath placed at each grave of over 240,000 fallen heroes.
We just want to give back.
Merle Worcester and his wife Karen started Wreaths Across America in 1992, when his company in Maine had a surplus of wreaths. He wanted to put them to good use.
You know, I always used to say it started by mistake, but it's no mistake. The good Lord doesn't make mistakes.
These aren't headstones, these are people represented, and to have this many people to come out and say thank you personally.
Joey never met his grandfather, Joseph Mayo, a decorated World War II veteran, but today pays him homage.
And there's men and women here who may have never had a visitor in years, and today when people have put a wreath down at their stone, they're here remembering them.
This December tradition goes beyond the gates of Arlington. Over the weekend, more than 900,000 wreaths were placed at veterans' grave sites across the country.
So to come out once a year and lay a wreath is a significant, it has a great meaning. It shows that we as Americans, we are forever indebted.
Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Mark. Let us never forget their sacrifice. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. As we say goodnight, we take you to Rome St. John Lateran, the Pope's Cathedral, for Sunday's opening of the Holy Door.